Parents, if getting your child out the door feels like negotiating a hostage release every single morning, you're not imagining it. The screen off for dinner battle, the meltdown leaving the grocery store, the Sunday night dread before the school week even starts, the 45-minute standoff over a pair of socks. Transitions are one of the most common flashpoints for kids today, and they hit hardest for kids with ADHD, anxiety, or sensory processing disorder. And the harder you try to manage the behavior, the more stuck everyone gets. Parents tell us all the time, I tried every reward chart, every visual timer, every deep breath, and nothing sticks. Here's what most parenting advice potentially misses. Smoother transitions aren't really a behavior problem. They're a nervous system issue. Once you understand what's actually happening in your child's brain and body during a change, everything shifts, including what kind of help the kiddo actually needs to move the needle. So this video is for parents whose child, melts down almost every single change, whether it's leaving the park, getting into the car, turning off the iPad, or even just when the start of the school week. If you tried every reward chart, countdown, consequence, and your child is still falling apart between activities, this video is for you. So what I'm going to talk about, what are you guys going to learn? We're going to dive into why transitions are so neurologically demanding for kids. And so what stuck in stress mode actually looks like during a transition. We're going to dive into why kiddos with ADHD, anxiety, and things like sensory processing disorder can struggle more. And so one of the things that we go into, we call it the perfect storm. And this is like a combination of stressors behind nervous system dysregulation. We'll also dive into some home strategies that actually work, and then also what to do when maybe they aren't enough, maybe when the home strategies aren't just clicking or sticking with the kiddo. And so one of our families that we have coming in here experienced just the struggles that I was talking about with the transitions to a T. Their little kiddo would have those big emotions, meltdown, and sometimes even get really aggressive towards mom and dad, and actually especially towards his sister when it came to play. They actually struggled to even drive more than an hour, hour and a half, because he just really did not like the car rides. And then sometimes when schedule change happens, right? If, hey, we were planning for this, and then something came up, he would just break down. Then they started getting neurological chiropractic care, and within a few weeks, mom and dad both reported that not only was their little man sleeping better, but he was also starting to process things better. And then after a few months of the care, the family said not only has he really stopped his aggressiveness towards his sister, but they took their first overnight trip in several years. Like, how cool is that? The numbers back up why these struggles cluster together. A 2022 national survey found anxiety was among the most common co-occurring conditions in kiddos with ADHD, affected roughly 2 out of 5. That overlap isn't coincidence. These conditions share a common neurological root, and until you address that root, you're chasing symptoms in a system that simply doesn't have the capacity to settle. So I'm going to dive into some of the science and talking points that we discussed earlier. So the first one, transitions, they demand a lot from a developing brain. So what happens is it asks the brain to disengage, then hold the next step in mind, and then shift gears at once. Researchers call this skill set shifting. So you're moving your attention from one task to another. It runs on an executive function in the prefrontal cortex, which keeps maturing into the mid-20s. So for kiddos with ADHD, anxiety, or sensory challenges, these circuits develop differently. The harder the brain is already working, the more taxing every switch becomes. So sometimes in those cases, a small request like put your shoes on can land like a much bigger issue. Second, a stressed nervous system can't downshift. So the autonomic nervous system works like a car with a gas and a brake pedal. The sympathetic is that fight or flight part of that nervous system, which is our gas pedal. That is activation. That's our alertness or go protection mode. And then the parasympathetic, the brake pedal, that's our rest and digest system, part of that nervous system. And that's where calm, regulation, and ability to adapt takes place. And so many kids today live with a stuck gas pedal and a weak brake pedal driven by an underactive vagus nerve. This imbalance is called dysautonomia, and it keeps the body in low grade alarm. Ordinary change registers as a threat, and meltdowns follow shortly after that. Thirdly, we're going to have ADHD, anxiety, and SPD. They all share like the same root diagnosis on the chart, even though it might differ, but the same underlying neurological patterns look very similar. All three of those involve sympathetic dominance and reduced capacity for flexible, regulated brain states. A child with ADHD finds it almost physically painful to break away from a preferred activity. A child with anxiety is flooded with worry before the change even arrives. And then a child with SPD is already overworking to process sound, light, and touch. This is why behavior charts can often fall flat, because you can't discipline a nervous system into just regulating. And then fourth, perfect storm behind the nervous system dysregulation. So kind of touched on that earlier. It's a stack of early stressors that tend to overwhelm a developing nervous system. It often starts with prenatal stress. So cortisol crosses the placenta and primes hypersensitivity. So baby gets what mama gets via that placenta. So if mama's really stressed and tense, baby's going to get that. So then on top of that, what can happen is if mama's already sympathetic dominance herself, then we can maybe experience more of a birth trauma like C-section, forceps, vacuum induction, or stalled labor. They tend to strain the upper neck, and it leads to more stress. And then early in the years, everything piles on. The antibiotics, ear infections, screens, everything's overstimulating. Each stressor alone might not be a big deal, but then stacked on top of each other, they leave that system just stuck floored on that gas pedal. And the ending result is a subluxation or neurological interference that keeps the stress response locked on. And so fifth, what do we talk about is what actually helps. So at home, give previews and countdowns so the brain has time to prepare instead of getting blindsided. Build predictable routines. The same sequence each morning and each night turns transitions into habits. Add movement. Motion is lotion, like we just body in motion stays in motion. We really want you to keep moving. That helps get some of that pent up energy out of that system. And so another thing is protecting the sleep. Trying to make sure that we have those set schedules, because kiddos do awesome when there's a set routine. And then yes, there is stuff that happens. And if it's something where you're doing all these things and yet that still isn't enough, whether you've done all those homework and tests and countdowns and all that stuff and still not working, your kiddo might just be overwhelmed, and that's where neurological chiropractic care can come in. So if your child struggles with meltdowns through every transition, no matter what, it's not a parenting failure. It's not a discipline problem. It's not something they'll just grow out of on their own. It's a sign their nervous system needs more support than home strategies alone can give. So here at Living Hope Chiropractic in Greenwood, Indiana, we use advanced insight scans, things that measure heart rate variability, surface EMG, and thermal scanning to see exactly where the nervous system is stuck and what's driving the dysregulation. From there, we deliver gentle, specific chiropractic adjustments to help restore balance, put ease on the gas pedal, and start to bring that brake pedal back online. And then what happens, parents usually start to see those daily flashpoints soften. Easier mornings, fewer meltdowns that pick up, smoother bedtimes, more flexibility when plans change. Your child doesn't need more labels, they need answers. So click the link in our bio or send us a DM to schedule your initial consultation here with us.